welcome into the latest edition of the Pump Fake following week 2 of the NFL preseason. Jarrett Bailey with you as always, joined by host of NFL Daily, my friend, Gregg Rosenthal. Good to see you, buddy. How are you?
What's up, Jarrett? Yeah, I'm excited to be back on. We were going to do this right when around the NFL was unfortunately and surprisingly ending, and then it was not a good week for it. So I am glad to finally be back on with you.
No, I appreciate you making the time. Yeah, you texted me a couple days ago, like, "Hey, I owe you an appearance. Let's get this thing set." By the way, can I tell everybody what you texted me like 2 months ago? Because it made me laugh incredibly hard.
I mean, I'm sure, but I don't know what it says.
It's not like anything like horrible, but I can't remember how we got on the topic. But you were talking about like watching tennis, and I was like, "Oh yeah, like I'm not like too big of a tennis guy. I'm more of like a pro wrestling guy." And you were like, "Bro, I know you're like the horniest account on the web," and I laughed so hard at that. That was the greatest thing I could have received.
Well, those two topics are very different, the pro wrestling and the horniest. Although I guess, yeah, some of the women are pro wrestling. That's where I connected it. I get it. Yeah, you are. I like it because I feel like I follow so many women that are cool with objectifying men because that's just fine to do. And I agree, it is fine to do. And they're just talking about how hot men are or whatever. And that's great. It's good to find out what they think. And yet I feel like for young men, it's a little verboten. It's not cool to do. So most just hold off on that. But we know who Jarrett thinks is hot. And
Amen. Yeah, I definitely I wear my thoughts on my sleeve when it comes to that, and I'm not afraid to hide it. But it just made me laugh, and I knew as soon as that you were like, "Yeah, let's do this pod," I was like, "Oh man, I gotta bring that up because it was good." So today, Gregg and I are going through 3 takes that are a little bit against the grain. I would say I don't want to say hot take, but maybe hot take. We'll see how this goes. I will let you start off with your first one, and then we'll see where this ball ends up rolling. But your first, scalding take.
No, see, I wanted this to stay in the realm of reality because I didn't want anything.
I agree.
I wouldn't just predict on NFL Daily, and so I was like, okay, what do I think actually can and will happen that would satisfy this requirement? I'm going to start with one on Malik Nabers. I'm going to say Malik Nabers sets the rookie record for receiving yards and receptions, which has, a vaunted record, which has held it's been 6 months since Puka Nacua said it. But before that, it was 63 years. I believe it was Bill Groman. It was a crazy one. And I got to admit, when I looked up the numbers and I said, man, Puka went 105 and 1486. That is a high bar to reach. And I'm trying not to fall for seeing a guy in preseason and just, that confirming my priors. But I just think the situation is so great for him to rack up numbers. And I think the talent is there for him to do it as well. And we can get into it at a little deeper level. But that's my first one is Malik Nabers going absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I saw you talking about it on Daily today. I mean, you're a big Malik Nabers guy. And the only thing that would concern me there is that I think that you and I could put up a better performance of what Daniel Jones did against Houston. And albeit it's preseason and everything like that, I just think that we should get a 30 for 30 on how Daniel Jones got $40 million a year from the New York Giants for throwing 15 touchdown passes and getting somehow the Giants had like the most random playoff appearance in recent memory. And they're like, I guess we got to pay him. I'm very against the Daniel Jones stuff. I don't know where you kind of fall on him going into this year.
For many years, I felt like I was higher than consensus because my thing was if he was protected, he's going to be like a mid-level quarterback. And everyone just thinks he's garbage. Then for that 1 year, I was lower than consensus because I was like, he's still that same guy from before. Like he's what Teddy Bridgewater kind of used to be. I think he could be that, even though his production hasn't been that as a pro. I think if he was in a better situation. And so now I guess I'm back higher than consensus that, look, he was protected in that game. He made one really crazy bad decision.
Really bad one.
Just brutal. And also his first throw of the game was absolutely terrible. But I got to say, he had some dimes in that game in the second quarter. This is where preseason is.
Specifically to your boy Nabers.
Yeah, I just like that he stayed aggressive, and he's been so afraid of his own shadow to go deep and down the field. And so this is a little bit of a bet on Daniel Jones too. Not that he's going to be good, but that the offensive line is going to be better than it's been. closer to average, and that I do think he passes that test, that if he's protected, he can be fine, and that there's no other competition. I mean, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt, Darius Slayton, those aren't high volume guys, and Neighbors just he moves different. To me, it's like a lot of the best receivers we've ever seen, in the last, let's say, 15 years come into the league. You can just tell it's going to translate right away, like OBJ, like Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
I put him in that same category. And then to me, the opportunity of an offense that's always going to be falling behind. And Brian Daboll really talking about how aggressive they're going to be throwing the ball deeper down the field, that Daniel Jones has to do that. And that's been an emphasis that all right, I'm buying it a little bit, even though if it's preseason.
I will say, if he keeps the beard, like that nice 5 o'clock shadow thing he's got going on, that's like when you create like a character in 2K, it's like +5 overall just for looking good. I think that there's something to that.
What about when did you settle that you're going to be a mustache?
I don't know. Paul Skeen's coming to Pittsburgh definitely did something to that. But yeah, I've been riding that high for a while, and it hasn't gone away yet. I made the mistake of like panicking and thinking that I needed to change it like the week of the combine. And so I just said, fuck it, I'm just going to get rid of it. And I immediately was like, I should not have done this. So there's a picture of Aaron Schatz and I at like a restaurant, and I just look 12 and I hate it. That's not good. So never again. What about you? I think you could maybe rock I don't know, mustache. I think goatee would be more.
I have a terrible mustache picture on my Instagram somewhere back in the day, but no, it doesn't come in. My dad had a nice manly beard. Stubble works. My wife is like, I don't like you clean shaven, but I don't like you with a big beard. So it's in between. Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. So my first take, not that one. That's a different show. My first proclamation. I'll start by asking you a question. So from weeks 10 to 18, the 49ers were first in the NFL in EPA per rush. You know who was second?
Oh, no. I think we have a similar bold take. Yeah, it was the Cardinals.
It was the Cardinals. Man, I'm high on the Cardinals offense. So my first proclamation here is that the Cardinals will be a top 10 offense in the NFL.
Okay. That's not crazy.
Yeah, I think that's pretty realistic and could happen. Flying under the radar a little bit. I think Drew Petzing did some fun stuff offensively. They've done their best to fix up their offensive line over the past couple of years, bringing in Paris Johnson. Overall, I think that they'll be a solid unit. And I think their defense is going to put them in a situation where their offense has to be, consistently putting up points. They've added a lot of young guys over the past couple of years, but they were 31st in the league in EPA per play defensively last year. Who did they add this year? Darius Robinson, Max Melton, another safety in the draft whose name is escaping me right now. He has 2 last names. Taylor Demerson, I think, is his last name. So they've added a bunch of pieces, but they're still very young on that side of the ball. And I think that their offense is going to be talented enough with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride, who people are high on. Greg Dortch is the NFL diehards guy of the year apparently too. So I think they have talent on that side of the ball, and I think defensively they're going to allow too many points where the offense has to continue to put up points. So yeah, high on the Cardinals offense, top 10 unit.
I feel like 47% of Greg Dortch's hype is just because Dortch is a funny name.
It is a fun name. Yeah,
I think it's just people like to say Greg Dortch. I just love with Harrison arriving there, how everyone kind of falls into place. Michael Wilson can be a good 2, I think, long term. I think he's going to develop into that. Zay Jones, if healthy, is a solid rotation receiver, and I've heard they're actually pretty high on him. And when I say rotation, it's like, all right, him and Dortch are essentially 4 and 5 because Trey McBride is 2, right, Wilson is 3, and that's good. That's a whole group. And yeah, you're one of your bold proclamation. I mean, I should have come up with a backup because I have a Cardinals one related to that I'll get to. That's more Kyler specific, but I think the run game just it's going to be dynamic. I love the blocking scheme that they had last year. They quietly have depth. At tackle, what teams have depth at tackle, and the movement that they got, it as a James Conner guy, James Conner is either great or he's not. And there's every reason to believe he's going to be healthy and that the scheme is going to make him look good this year. And he's got a fun backup in Trey Benson, who's battling out for that backup job, had some nice runs in the preseason. And yeah, it's a bet on Petzing, who got great production out of Dobbs and got Kyler Murray, I think, to do things that he wasn't necessarily doing when he was younger, which is go through his reads a little quicker, throw to the middle of the field, and just look a little more like a veteran quarterback.
Yeah, and it took a little bit for Kyler to kind of get his feet back under him after a year away, but closed out the season strong. Both of his last 2 games, he finished with a passer rating over 110. James Conner, I think there's a direct correlation between what haircut James Conner has and how good he plays. He had like that weird, like the top of his head was buzzed, and then the back of it was mullet, and like his last year in Pittsburgh. And there's a reason I think that the Steelers didn't bring him back is because the play, very much correlated with the awful haircut. But I think, James Conner, he's been around for a minute too. I think he's 29 this year. Like he's been around the block, but he's still productive. They brought in Trey Benson. I think they still have Michael Carter on the roster. So I mean, they've got a nice collection of running backs. I think that they'll be a fun offense for sure.
Yeah, it's a bet on the coaching staff too, and on the defense. Although I guess that doesn't affect EPA per play, but it will affect your fantasy points.
It sure will. Your second.
All right, so I'll just go to Cardinals. Is Cardinals like becoming too much of a hipster team? Everyone's
maybe they might be
I mean, you are wearing a Vans hat, so you would be a representative pick of like a hipster team, and I would be too. I mean, in terms of what I like. So I have Kyler Murray finishes top 5 in the MVP race. Now they have votes. Now they have votes, and you get 1 through 5. I went back to look last year. I was like, wow, CJ Stroud got 4 fifth place votes. He actually came in like 9th for MVP last year, which is, first of all, I'm glad the NFL now has these votes 1 to 5. I think they should do it with every award because I think it's a nice little document that you can see, wow, Stroud was actually in that territory, or Josh Allen, came in 4th last year. I just like to know that long term. So I'm saying Kyler Murray finishes top 5 in MVP. He spoke about it, or actually there was a report about it in Arizona, just how his lateral quicks are back, that everyone last year he could run straight and everyone was like, wow, he's coming off the ACL and he can still run so fast, because he moved pretty well at the end of last year, but he didn't have that lateral movement, which makes him special and makes him one of the best running quarterbacks of all time. And he has to be careful, but he has, I think, over the course of his career, how much and when to do that. And they're not going to major in that, but that is a huge part of making that running game extra special. But it's just betting on talent that he has been a feature. And I've written some of these columns about midway through the season, or like 5 weeks into the season. He's been a hot starter, and that's because Cliff Kingsbury's offenses were always these hot starters. But he's been in those articles where it's like MVP voting through week 5. Like, I got Kyler Murray 3rd, or like MVP voting through week 9. I think it was 3 years ago or something. It's like Kyler Murray's 2nd or 3rd there. Like, he has shown that he has the ability, has the talent to play at that level. And now I think he's got superior coaching. And more importantly, he's got more of the mental makeup. It just takes some quarterbacks longer than others. I think of your Pittsburgh's own Ben Roethlisberger, when his mind started to catch up with his body. He's a very different player than Kyler Murray. They're like, that's when you got the best Ben Roethlisberger. And that took till his late 20s. And that's where Kyler Murray is getting to.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, you touched on it when, I was talking about mine, the ability to see the middle of the field better as well, not necessarily just immediately dip and try to run, while he can do that, obviously, is good for his development as well. And I think that, we talked a little bit about Drew Pensing, but I think, quietly becoming one of the better offensive coordinators in football too. And I think the Cardinals as a whole, like, we all kind of clowned the Jonathan Gannon hire before last season. He had a bad intro presser and just a bunch of weird stuff. And then looked like he really had these guys.
Gave up 34 points in the Super Bowl. That was a problem.
That was a big one too. Yeah, sure. And even though they went 4-13 last year, like, all I could hear is like, man, Jonathan Gannon's getting something out of these guys, at least from a bad roster. So I'm excited to see what they can do in 2024. My next one is going to be AFC North based, and this one might be a little bit more bold, but I will say that the Browns will bench Deshaun Watson. They will cut him in 2025 post June 1. So I looked at the numbers for this, and if they were to cut him post June 1, the dead cap in 2025, so it'd be about $109 million in dead cap. They have $265 million in cap space going into 2025. That's 8th most in the NFL. So, I mean, he's eating up a big chunk of that, obviously. But the bigger argument that people will say is, man, if you do that, I mean, what are they going to do? I'll say this. It doesn't matter what they have on the roster if the quarterback is that bad. And if he's that bad again, which I just think that's who he is now, like he hasn't been good in 4 years. If he's that bad again, you may as well just rip off the Band-Aid now, roll forward with somebody else in 2025 and just kind of eat it and just put that in the past. You got Jameis and Tyler Huntley there for a reason. I think that they're very much banking on bad Deshaun Watson showing up. And if he does, then I think it's better just to rip that Band-Aid off, suck it up for 2025, see what you can do that year, rather than keep this thing rolling down the road. I just think that's kind of who he is now, and I just don't see it getting better.
So I think that's what will happen if he plays this season like he did the previous two, or if he's hurt half the time and plays like the other half. I agree. As much as, I would frankly enjoy that because I was so,
I'm sure most people would.
I just thought the way he got to Cleveland was shameful.
Yeah.
Not just by the Browns. The reason I got so into it was just like, I thought the national media, the media all helped it happen. That actually, if it wasn't for the assistance to that agent who's so powerful and has so many reporters under his thumb and just stayed very quiet about how insane the entire thing was, that it honestly wouldn't have happened, that the public outcry would have been important enough. But the Browns have ate it because of that trade since. So I guess if you were rooting to get like the draft capital, it's amazing that they're as good a team as they are, despite the draft capital and the quarterbacks, because everyone Kevin Stefanski has coached at quarterback has been more productive than Deshaun Watson. And it has played at a higher level, at least at some point under Stefanski, than we've ever seen Watson, no matter who it is, including Joe Flacco, who they couldn't bring back because he was too good. All that being said, I almost have a hard time seeing this happen because I see the more likely route is somewhere in the middle of what you're putting out there and what the Browns fans are hoping for, that he somehow returns to the Deshaun Watson, where he gives you just enough to be like, because Kevin Stefanski is a good coach. The talent around him is really good overall, as long as they get their tackle situation worked out. Like, they've been able to coach up the offensive line. Hopefully losing Callahan isn't that huge of a deal. And that he'll be somewhere in between, that he'll actually improve, and that'll improve to, I don't know where in the quarterback pecking order, somewhere between 13 and 18, you know what I mean? And it'll just be this other nebulous area where they hate living in, the trade is still a disaster, but they actually get rid of Stefanski instead of Deshaun Watson because it's easier to do, even though they got him a new contract if things go really south.
Yeah, if they fire Kevin Stefanski instead of getting rid of Deshaun Watson, that would be just monumentally stupid.
These two haven't shown they can work well together, and I still want to see what kind of offense they run, because last year they tried to really bend the offense to what does Deshaun Watson do well instead of what Kevin Stefanski's been successful with in the past, and that didn't really work. And we'll see. Like, the running game needs to be great there too to help him out, and I haven't been that encouraged as what I've heard in the offseason.
Fair enough. Like Cleveland is, I don't know, man. They are that weird in-between team where, like, you could talk me into them winning 12 games if all goes well because their defense is that good. You could also talk me into them going 6-11 because their quarterback is just that bad.
I agree.
Make up for it. So it's, especially in that division too, where, the Bengals are going to be good if healthy. Baltimore is, still going to be in that mix. We'll see with the Steelers. But that's very much up in the air.
Right. They're one of the highest variance teams. I totally am with you, because we've seen all they need is average quarterback play.
Yeah.
And they could be like they are last year. And so Deshaun Watson should be capable of that. I mean, I've gotten to think it's more of a mental thing that, I mean, he never seems to be someone that is enjoying what he is doing, and which makes a lot of sense if you're him and you're carrying all this and you never really like made peace publicly with everything that happened. And you went from being one of the most beloved people in the entire NFL to hated. And it's like he's carrying that because he just hasn't played like the Deshaun Watson we saw in Houston.
And if anything that we saw from Flacco, like, I think that there was evidence that you could play very free in that offense and just say, F it, I'm going to chuck it and we're going to see what happens. Because that's what Flacco did all year. Just like, what the hell? I got a really good defense on the other side of the ball. I'm going to let this thing fly and just see what happens. And it worked for a long time until, it didn't. But Cleveland's interesting for sure. What is your third one?
Okay. I'm going to go 49ers will not win the NFC West.
Oh, okay. I was legitimately thinking about putting something similar, and I'm sure the same team.
Are we getting too like swayed by what's going on? No, because I had this in my head already going into this year. I just feel like they have so much of the baggage and so much of the weight and the problems that come with winning multiple Super Bowls, except they haven't actually won it. It's the worst place to be. You know what I mean? Like it's this disease of more, but they haven't actually won it. And so there's that like gnawing negativity around a lot of stuff. And so it's Trent Williams and Brandon Ayuk. I think those will get worked out. And, at this point, it'd be a surprise if both of them aren't suited up for the 49ers week 1. And they're still really talented, but it's just staying healthy. And their offensive line and their secondary always seems like a little bit of a magic trick that they managed to pull off. And I just think it's hard to do it year after year after year. And I don't think they're going to have like a Sean McVay post Super Bowl type of year. But I do think they're overdue for a disappointing year where either the Seahawks or the Rams, who both have capability of doing so, pick them off. And yeah, I went and looked and what are their odds to even make the playoffs? If I wanted to go really bold, I would say they don't even make the playoffs. And that's somewhere at, I think it's like plus 400. Like to me, that seems like a good gamble to make. Not that I'm allowed to as an employee of the NFL, but like, I think there's a greater chance than that they completely miss the playoffs. Now, if you push game to shove, I think they're more likely than not to make the playoffs. So I'm not going to just throw that out there to be like a hot take guy, but I say they don't win the division and it wouldn't shock me if they don't make the playoffs.
Yeah, you said plus 400 odds that they could miss the playoffs.
Yeah, I feel like there's a greater chance than that of them not happening. That it's less, and I hate doing this. It's less about like going through the depth chart and everything, and more of just watching the NFL for a long time. And this is the hardest thing to do, is to keep getting back to that spot. And if they took a step back for a year, it doesn't mean that they can't make it all work next year. But this year, the offensive line, keeping some of those key players healthy. I think, Drake Greenlaw coming back off of his Achilles, their defensive line is not what it once was. If you look at, just the depth chart, it's not nearly as deep as it used to be. They always manage to get great production from their cornerbacks, and I'm not really sure how they do it. And so it's a really tough division. We talked about the Cardinals. I like the Seahawks and the Rams, and I just think they could be on the outside looking in.
Yeah, eventually the attrition's got to kick in, you'd think, with how many years in a row they've made deep runs in the playoffs, and it feels like eventually a come down has to happen. And everything with like Ayuk and Trent Williams and everything, even if it does get worked out, I mean, the constant outside noise throughout the offseason, I'm sure that I don't think that's nothing. There's a lot there, and I think I'm just high on the Rams, where I liked what they did. I like what Sean McVay did last year, where he just embraced, becoming more of a power run type team, and seeing the development of Puka Nacua and allowing Cooper Kupp to kind of age gracefully into that like 1B option. Defensively, I'm curious because obviously there's no more Aaron Donald there, and Raheem Morris is also gone. But if anybody has proven the ability to get the most out of, maybe, I don't want to say lesser players, but, to get the most out of everybody there, it is Sean McVay. And I agree. I don't see, a Rams post Super Bowl fall off. I think the thing with the Rams that year is just they were thin and their best players all got hurt, and they were, strolling out. Okay, we'll sign Baker Mayfield and play him immediately.
Vibes were weird though. There was definitely like I think it's very hard for teams to deal with success, and I think the 49ers have done an incredible job staying hungry and consistent in their approach. But I think they're, like I said, dealing with some of the issues of consistently winning without actually having gotten over the top.
They're certainly in that weird spot where they've consistently like gotten to the Super Bowl or gotten to NFC Championship games, but fans are like, okay, well, when are you going to finish the job? And I think that's a very fair thing to point out. It's like, okay, maybe that's going to set in and weigh on them. I'm intrigued. What do they do with Purdy, by the way? Because that's something that's got to eventually come up where they're going to have to pay him too.
I mean, he's going to get the next QB contract where they're all kind of getting roughly. And it's very weird that QBs 1 through 13 all end up making roughly about the same amount of money, right, depending on when their contracts come in. But I think he's going to get that contract, barring him looking like he looked in his brief preseason appearance on Sunday night, I believe it was. I do like that we are past the point in the Brock Purdy discourse that no one freaks out when he goes 2 for 6 for 11 yards and a couple of the craziest throws you've ever seen in a preseason game. Everyone's like, it's fine. We've seen enough from Brock.
Hold on. There's a new thing here on this program. Where do we put Brock Purdy on the Pickett to Patrick scale? There's got to be. So I don't think he's quite like in the orange. I don't think he's in the green either. I think he's perfectly like in the yellowish orange, like barely over the middle. I'm a little bit.
As a representative of the colorblind community, I'm not really digging this whole idea.
I did not know that.
This is tough. But he would be somewhere right in the middle.
Okay.
Like we did a QB draft and it was kind of in a vacuum, me and Daniel Jeremiah, and he ended up taking Purdy in the top 12 or so. But when I was having him in a vacuum and it was just this year only, he was pretty much smack dab in the middle, a little below that. Of you, when you actually write them all down, you realize, it's a good time for quarterbacks. There's a lot of really good quarterbacks, like Trevor Lawrence, who I'm maybe a little lower on consensus then, but it's like, wow, Trevor Lawrence isn't even top 12. That's kind of crazy to me.
It's the peak of like really good quarterback. I mean, it's just because like anymore, like you have to have one or you're just kind of SOL. Speaking of teams that might not have one, my Steelers are kind of the forefront of conversation right now because of Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, but I'm going to stay the course. I'm still going to say that they're going to make the playoffs in 2024.
Okay.
Just because, man, like I've watched every snap of every game, I mean, throughout my life, but especially these last 2 years, which was not easy. And just seeing how terrible they were offensively in 2023, especially, and they still managed to somehow win 10 games and get to the playoffs. I don't see how they'll somehow be worse than that. Even if you think that Russell Wilson and Justin Fields are both washed, they are both sizable upgrades over Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky. And I think that Arthur Smith is a sizable upgrade over Matt Canada. They still have a very good defense when everybody's healthy. They dealt with a lot of injuries last year on that side of the ball. I think that if they just get serviceable quarterback play and the defense lives up to their expectations, then I don't see them winning, less than 9-10 games and, getting into, even if it's the 7 seed again, I still think that they'll be, one of those 7 teams in the AFC playoffs.
Yeah, I love their defensive front. I just think that alone with Mike Tomlin coaching them and a secondary that I think has a little more upside than it probably did a year ago, and getting Minkah Fitzpatrick maybe to get back to his peak level of play, that can be a top 5 defense. And their front is just crazy. The depth and the edge, it just reminds you so much of Steelers teams from 10 years ago, from 15 years ago. It's amazing that they keep doing it like this. And you're right. When you say that it can't be worse and, the coaches got to be better and stuff. It started to remind me of how Patriots fans were talking before last.
No, don't say that, Greg.
I was like, it can't be worse. But the difference is the quarterbacks were even worse last year because it was like beyond broken Mac Jones, whereas you are getting an upgrade. I don't know if Russell Wilson in his current form is going to be much of an upgrade, but we'll see. I think Justin Fields will give you a little more juice than Russell Wilson.
I still think they're going to start the season with Russ as the starter for at least the first 2 games because it'll be Atlanta and Denver, and I don't think he's not going to not play against Denver. But I think that him missing the beginning of training camp with the calf and them not playing him in the first game and him looking a little bit shy, albeit the offensive line looked really bad against Buffalo. But I think that Justin Fields has shown more than Russell Wilson, throughout this, training camps of preseason thus far. And there's clearly more juice there in terms of what he gives you as a runner. I would still expect Wilson to be the starter for at least the first couple games. I think the leash is much shorter now than it would have been in, say, May. But I do think that Fields will take over sooner than later, and then we'll see, and if if it works out, then maybe they have a guy that they can, see as, a potential franchise guy. I'll say that it wouldn't be the first time Arthur Smith has helped turn around the career of a, semi-dual threat quarterback that was kind of washed off or sent away by his former team. I don't think that Fields will be as good as, Titans Tannehill in 2019 and 2020, but, there's precedent for Arthur Smith doing this.
There's a lot of differing opinion on how good Arthur Smith is going to be, and he's going to be tested. I was 100% with you. I was like, Steelers are making the playoffs this year coming into camp. It's one of those things where the offseason is just too long and you start turning back on your opinions and analysis that you had months ago because it's just been going on forever, and you get affected about what you've seen and heard. And yeah, I'm a little worried about the tackle situation. You hope that, okay, Broderick Jones, I guess, is moving to left tackle, and then Fautanu, and it's like, and you say, okay, we're going to slot him in, and now Frazier's at center, and it's like, and that's all going to work. And sometimes it does work, and sometimes it's like, no, they're not ready at all. And actually, Broderick Jones is a huge problem, and their number 2 wide receiver situation is the worst in the league. And Steelers fans, and you foremost among them, kept saying all offseason, oh, they're definitely going to bring in like a great wide receiver. It's going to happen.
That they would, Greg.
Well, and they don't grow on trees. To be honest, I'm impressed they got as close as they did. And I was like, you know what? I got to give it to these guys. They actually maybe almost got one, but now in the end, they're not going to get one. I always thought, like, they're not going to get any wide receivers. People don't just give up receivers. And in the end, I think that's what's going to happen to them.
I agree. If they do bring in anybody, I mean, it's going to be like, a Traylon Burks, who's like 9th on the Titans depth chart right now, or a John Mechie, who's just buried behind a bunch of Texans receivers.
Some of those, like, they can upgrade, though. I mean, Van Jefferson was like a 4 for Atlanta, 5 for the Rams coming into last year. And they always wanted a little more out of Van Jefferson. It didn't happen for him. So I just don't see why it will now in terms of being physical enough to really withstand a season. Roman Wilson's just been hurt, so that's disappointing, but they really don't have many like guys in the roster that you feel like can hit even if things go well. So that's my skeptical view. The optimist view is they could run the hell out of the ball.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of positive reports about Calvin Austin being there for OTAs and minicamp. He did look good throughout the offseason portion of things, but he's not an outside guy. He's very much a slot guy. He's 5'8", and that's probably being a little bit nice on his height. So, there are 2 guys that, you mentioned Roman Wilson, Calvin Austin. Both of them are going to be predominant slot guys that don't really have that other boundary receiver. And if teams can just bracket George Pickens and say, all right, Van Jefferson, good luck, fella, go out there and beat us, then, they could be, there's definitely a ceiling there for sure. And we'll see, how far that'll take them. I'm very cautious about what that's going to look like, but cautiously optimistic, more optimistic than I was a year ago.
Okay.
More so because Kenny Pickett is now Eagles fans' problem. And they're very full-throated about it during preseason games.
History has proven you right, Jarrett. I mean, there's very few islands that have been proven more correct than you saying all along that Kenny Pickett was a disaster for the Steelers and all their fans fighting back against you. And you know what? You were right on that one.
I was like an annoying little prick about that when they traded him for like 3 days. I took a weekend to do that, and then I stopped. But over the past week or so, Eagles fans are like, God, this guy stinks. I was like, yeah, he does, doesn't he? He's not good.
I actually was coming up with potential player movement scenarios for NFL Daily for our Tuesday show. And I was like trying to find a home for Kenny Pickett because I was like, would the Eagles just flip him for a player for player? I don't think they'll want to do a draft pick because it'll be like a 7th round pick, and then that's embarrassing. But I don't know. I didn't really come up with many great answers of like, I don't know. Some team just gives up like a backup offensive lineman for Kenny Pickett. If the Eagles don't want him, they'd probably just keep him and have 3 guys. Why not?
It's a whole mess, but it is what it is. Not my issue anymore. Gregg Rosenthal, appreciate you hopping on today, buddy. What have you got coming on NFL Daily?
Yeah, we got Jordan Rodriguez on Tuesday's show, and Colleen Wolfe and Patrick Claybon later in the week. Mina Kimes and Kevin Clark when it's daily. Like it's all happening now, and I'm excited that the season's about to get going.
Sounds like a tremendous lineup. If you're not already subscribed to the YouTube, do all that. If you're listening to this as a podcast only, leave a 5-star review, maybe leave a nice comment. I read all of them, even the bad ones. Don't leave a bad one, though, because then I'll eat like a tub of ice cream, and then my lady friend won't be attracted to me anymore. Then I'll die alone, and you don't want that to happen. So subscribe on YouTube, leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. Appreciate y'all tuning in. We'll be back later on in the week on the Pump Fake. Take care till then.